Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we get started on these stories, I just want to give a general warning. Pretty much all of these stories are pretty messed up and very disturbing. From mentioning of suicide to sexual abuse, there's a lot of messed up stuff in this one. So if you don't want to hear stories like that, now you know. All that being said, if you're all ready, let's go ahead and get started. And remember to always stay hungry. I'm a 25-year-old female from South Africa, and this is my story of my abusive ex and his even more abusive family. All these events happened over a span of 6 years, with me being between the ages of 17 and 23. And the thing is, not a lot of people know my story, and you'll soon find out why. I know this is all in the past, but it really still gets to me quite a lot, and it changed me so much. 6 years of my life had been wasted and ruined, and my story is pretty lengthy, so please bear with me. For my story, I'll be using fake names for everyone, and I won't mention my own real name either. I won't bore you with the first part, so to put it short, when I was 16, my mom and I used to live with my aunt, who's my mom's sister, and her husband. One day out of the blue, when I came back from school and stepped into the yard, my mom had told me that me and her are moving. For some reason, my aunt's husband had kicked the two of us out. Until now, I still have no idea why. So in that year, at the end of November, we moved out and we ended up living with my mom's brother. I'll call him Uncle Jim. So the next year in January, my uncle had started searching in the surrounding areas for a school for me to go to. According to my Uncle Jim, all the schools near us had been fully booked, and the other schools were too far to go to. But I personally think that wasn't the case. I just think he didn't want to put me in a school because he knew he'd have to pay for all my school supplies and more. And at the time, he was fostering another girl. She's about 6 or 7 years younger than me and wasn't even related by blood. She's my uncle's ex-wife's ex-boyfriend's child. But when he met this girl who I'll call Allison, he really grew fond of her, and he took her in because her family couldn't help with schoolwork, so she was doing really bad in school. And it really breaks my heart to say that my uncle loved her even more than he loved me or his own family. He treated her like a goddess. She got everything she wanted and was extremely spoiled. And with him already taking care of the thing who he treated as a princess, I don't think he was willing to do the same for me. So he told me that I had to go out and find a job. So there I went. I was 16, turning 17 in October of that year, and I had to go and find a job. Luckily, my mom's other sister also lived with us by my uncle at the time, and she was a manager at a local grocery store, and the two bosses were crazy about her. So she had managed to get me a job there as a cleaner, and if I thought my life went downhill then, boy was I wrong. I started working on the 5th of February, and life just basically went on. Working long, terrible hours for basically a peanut salary, clashing with coworkers who kind of bullied me, and more. So I'd been working there for the entire year, and everything was okay. That next year, I had started seeing a guy coming into the shop basically every day to get groceries. Some days he was alone, other days he was with another guy, who I later found out was his cousin, and he was a special needs kid. He was older than the first guy though. So me and this guy, let's call him Mark, and his special needs cousin David. So Mark and I had started glancing at each other more and more whenever he came into the shop. Eventually we started greeting each other. Then it went to talking, to giving hugs when we'd greet, and then lastly exchanging contacts and talking over the phone. Now, without adding more boring details, we became besties, then started dating. We had started dating in the end of the same year, so to be precise, December 26th, 2015. Basically a little over a year since we moved. So right in the beginning of the very last week of December of 2015, I had went over to Mark's house. At the time, he lived with his mother, Wendy, and his special needs cousin that I had talked about earlier, David. They lived in a small complex consisting out of 6 units per complex. So the initial idea was to stay the week, spend New Year's there, and then go back home. But when the week ended, we were both pretty sad about the idea of being away from each other. So he had begged my mom for me to stay another week, and she said yes. It went on like that, and eventually I ended up just moving in with them. So by then, basically a month had passed, and I hadn't been back home since the previous year, which was 2015. So I had basically been there since a week before 2016 and then straight through. Miss Wendy, my ex's mom, had a disease that basically eats all of your muscles and everything throughout the years, basically leaving you disabled. When I first started living with them, it didn't affect her that badly yet. She was still able to get around with crutches. At first, she was crazy about me. Took me to work every morning and we'd constantly chat about everything. But nearing the middle of the year, she had started treating me badly. Not too much, but enough for me to know that she's kind of developing a grudge against me. And before that, in between the months that I met Mark's older sister Jackie and her wife Melanie, they were also nice towards me. About 2 more months passed and Miss Wendy just started hating me more and more for some reason, and would even go as far as to confront my ex Mark about some of the things I do to upset her, to which I don't even know about to this day. I'd just hear Mark and his mother screaming at each other with my name in between her words. I would just sit there not knowing what the fuck I did wrong. And she'd even go as far as to call Jackie over the phone and then rant to her about us upsetting her and calling us things like garbage and piece of shit. Words that really cut deeply. But I don't think that Mark is an angel, because even though he defended me against his mom's absurd accusations, there were also plenty of times that me and him would argue and fight, and when that happened, he would sometimes physically abuse me, pushing me around or picking me up by my throat and throwing me. Or sometimes he would get all up in my face, clutch his teeth while aggressively yelling at me, and at the same time have this vicious look in his eyes. This started happening about 3 months or so after I moved in with them, and if I'm being honest, we fought a lot, and I mean almost constantly. And every time he would abuse me, I would remember my mom's words. When a guy lifts his hands on you for a first time, get away from him ASAP, because he'll just keep doing it. But stupidly, I never wanted to leave because I loved him, and I always thought that he wouldn't do it again, and every time I was wrong. I never wanted to tell my mom because I know that she would have forcefully taken me out of that situation, and I still want to kick myself for not leaving sooner. So another month or so passed, and we were still basically halfway into 2016 when Jackie and her wife came to visit, where she then told her mom that her job wants to transfer her to KZN, basically another name for Durban. We had lived in Johannesburg at the time, so for the rest of the remaining 2016, the family had made plans and stuff to go to KZN, and we had spent time sorting out the house and packing and all that. And obviously I was going with them. So I had to quit my job, but I think I quit too early because there was still an entire 4 to 6 months left of the year. I might not be super accurate on this, but it's what I can remember. Because I also remember that my mom spent Christmas with us at Mark's house that year, and she went home the next day. Then the new year rolled around. That was the very first time that Jackie had started doing the same to me as her mother did. And that evening she was drunk and mad about the things that her mom had said about me over the year and ended up yelling at me. Literally getting all up in my face and screaming at me. Saying things like, "I hate you, I hate you," over and over again. She even physically attacked Mark, and her crazy wife Melanie was also in the mix, screaming at us and attacking. All of that happened on the very last day of December 2016, only a few hours before 2017. After I quit my job in 2016, I had started cleaning Miss Wendy's house for a salary, and I had also helped Mark look after his mother, since her disease was getting worse and worse, and she was kind of too heavy for him to pick up her alone, as well as put her in a wheelchair, and from there pick her up again and then putting her on the toilet, bed, or wherever else she wanted to be. So all that is going on, and my life is just getting harder and harder. Eventually 2016 passed, the fighting and everything I talked about earlier passed, and 2017 came around. A few months after the new year started, we eventually moved to KZN, and I'm actually getting tears in my eyes right now, because that's how I felt when I had to leave my mom behind. I wasn't happy, but I had to choose, and I made an awful decision. So I'll make this part kind of short as well. We all moved to KZN, all 7 of us, because it was me, Mark, Jackie and her wife Melanie, Miss Wendy, Mark and Jackie's cousin, and an older lady who I think was Miss Wendy's aunt or some other messed up shit like that. Anyway, we moved and life just got worse. Mark never really stopped physically abusing me when we would fight or argue. Sometimes I would go as far as to hurt myself out of aggression when we fought. One day I hit my head so hard against the wall that for the brief second that my head hit the wall, my eyesight flashed white, if that makes any sense. And sometimes Jackie and Mark would fight, or Jackie and their cousin, or Mark and their cousin. It was just really messed up. And when I say fight, I mean screaming at each other like ballistic animals. And I'm extremely sensitive to fighting and yelling. My heart can't handle it. Their fighting scared me so much that even if someone talks too loud to me or anyone else, I feel like I'd get a panic attack and start crying. That's one of the things I meant when I said earlier that because of them, I really changed a lot. One of the other things that also changed me was when I talked to Jackie, and the tone of my voice was too loud according to her. She'd yell at me and tell me I should drop my cheeky attitude towards her and stuff like that. And it was when I didn't even have an attitude whatsoever. I just wanted her to hear me because sometimes she didn't hear me talking and said I should speak up. But whenever I did, that was her reaction towards me. And since we moved to KZN, Jackie also started yelling and screaming at me. She would swear at me and call me all sorts of ugly names. She literally abused me almost every day. And one day she told me that because I'm not working, my mother has to pay rent for me living there every month or so, otherwise I have to leave. She basically forced us to do it. And at the same time, they had forced me to work as a maid in the house, all alone. So actually, they had to pay me for being their housemaid, not me paying them. My mom had told me that she couldn't give them more than 1,000 rand a month because it's all she had. Which for anyone wondering, that's $50 USD. They didn't like that, but accepted it. And later on, that also became a problem. Jackie also yelled and fought with me how my mom is so useless that she can't even give more than 1,000 rand a month, and monthly groceries is much more expensive than that. That's excluding rent, electricity, and everything else. But they never understood that that was just all my mom could give. She didn't work and she only received a pension and had her own necessities to buy as well. And according to South Africa law, no one is allowed to take a pensioner's money. From what I heard, even the bank isn't allowed to do so. You can actually take someone to court for doing that. And every little bit of money my mom sent me, Jackie and them took from me. They never bought me shampoo or body spray or anything. And even when my mom sent my money to buy it myself, they took it. I even had to wash my hair with dish soap at times because I didn't have shampoo, and I had to use toilet paper as padding when I was on my period. They constantly took my money, forced me to clean the house, and fight with me over small things. Sometimes they'd tell me to do something, and then halfway through they'd call me to do something else, which would take quite some time. And then when I'm done, I would go back to doing the first thing, and they would fight and complain with me why the first chore isn't finished yet. But they kept me so busy with the other chore that I wasn't able to finish the first one. After we moved to KZN, we had stayed in that house for a month. Then we moved again. Still in the same city, just another suburb or town or whatever. It was because the first house had too many stairs for Mark's mother as she couldn't walk, because at that point she was now fully in a wheelchair. The disease had taken its toll on her. And sometimes when it came to me, she would stir up some shit again. Things that I didn't even know of. And then Jackie would take the fight from there, yelling, cussing, and swearing at me. Again, the mental abuse. The second house we moved to was where shit really went down. That's where Jackie lost her stupid head, more than she already had. This is where she became more violent. She would yell and fight with us more and more, the mental abuse only getting worse. And that is where physical abuse also came in. Great. Now I wasn't just getting physically abused by Mark when we fought, but now even by Jackie at times whenever she was drunk and a fight broke out. One evening she had grabbed me by my hair and yanked me so hard that somehow my head started bleeding. Both Jackie and her mother hated the crap out of me. They even talked really bad shit about my mother when all she ever did for them was send money every month, and if they needed to borrow extra, she sent them that as well. She even sometimes bought things like candy and stuff and sent it down to us so we could all have a little luxury. She bought candy and stuff for the whole family. They'd chow it down like pigs, and then the next day talk bad about her like she's some sort of garbage. And I couldn't say a word to defend her or myself, or they'd physically attack me. And almost every time, Jackie and her wife Melanie would fight and get physically abusive toward each other, and I'd witness it every time. There were times that Melanie wanted to commit suicide. Then she'd either overdose on all of her mental pills, or she would drink cleaning chemicals and go on a rampage, destroying literally everything in the house, throwing microwaves and other big and small objects on the floor, and then end up laying and throwing up on the floor, refusing for anyone to take her to the hospital. And when they finally got there, I'm left to clean the mess she made. Her vomit, broken glasses and cups, blenders, and like I said, microwaves that she flung off the counters and stuff. I had to witness it all. And as I said earlier, with me not being able to handle fights and yelling and screaming, I would end up getting panic attacks and everyone would tell me to just stop pretending, that I'm just doing it for attention. Well, thanks to them, I can handle fighting and screaming even less now than I could then. Since I had lived with them, I now truly know what complete and utter depression really feels like. And they had caused my very first very real panic attack and a lot more. One time I even had to grab a kitchen knife out of Mark's cousin's hand because she was basically slicing her arm because she and her boyfriend, who also lived with us at the time, had a fight. And then Jackie would get involved and would become, as always, a massive feud between everyone. And the cousin is just as crazy as the rest of the family. The night I grabbed the knife, she could have stabbed me with it. That's how crazy she and the entire family was. We stayed in the second house for a year, and in the next year, a few months in, Jackie's wife Melanie decided she wanted a monkey. By this time, I've lost count of which year it was. The monkey she wanted was one of those small capuchin monkeys. She promised high and low she would quit alcohol and stop smoking weed if she could get one. And yeah, I didn't mention this, but both Jackie and Melanie were alcoholics and weed addicts. Those two things were their obsession. Every day they drank alcohol and smoked weed, and not just one bottle. Their minimum was at least 3 to 4 bottles a day. When they talked to Miss Wendy about it, she refused, but they secretly went and done it, and they only told her once the monkey was in our house in his cage. Miss Wendy was furious, but eventually accepted it. I, on the other hand, didn't want anything to do with it. Melanie looked after it as she promised, but not fully. She didn't quit her alcohol or weed as she promised. And some days they threw parties with friends and alcohol, and I was forced to look after that bloody animal. I didn't say no, and then it started becoming a regular thing for me to look after him. At first, I had to help change its nappy, then was occasionally called out of my room or wherever I was to do it. Then I had to start making food for the monkey, and his bottle of milk as he drank only baby milk. Then I had to clean its cage every day, take out the blankets and teddy bears and put fresh clean ones in there. I even had to start looking after him when those two whose monkey it belonged to went out to go clubbing, drink, and party. He became my full responsibility, and I hated it, because it wasn't my animal. I didn't want to be part of it, and I didn't ask to look after him and do everything for him. I didn't ask for it, and I didn't dare care about it. I know it probably sounds brutal, but I'm just not a monkey person. I don't like them. Over time, though, he became more and more my responsibility. When Jackie was at work, her wife Melanie would sleep her entire day away, and I was left by myself to clean the entire house and do all the washing, as well as fully look after the brat monkey, give him milk, water, food, and attention and everything. And his actual owner would just sleep the whole damn day. Even when Jackie came home from work, she would give their monkey attention, but still ordered me to bring him food, water, chips, and more. She would barely lift a finger to do all those things, even cleaning the house. She thought that because she had a job, she was too good to clean the house and bring food and snacks for her monkey to eat, or even do anything for that matter. And no matter if I was sick, tired, or depressed, I still had to do everything. They'd just tell me to get over it. A few months after they got the monkey, Miss Wendy ended up in the hospital because her disease made it hard for her to swallow. Over a few weeks, maybe even a month or two, she would be in and out of the hospital, and eventually she went in and never came out. They said that she died and they resuscitated her, but that after that she was just never the same. She ended up being in a vegetative state, only the machines kept her breathing. Eventually they had to turn it off, and before they did, each of us stood by her side and talked to her. She could hear you, but she could never move. Even after how badly she treated me and disrespected me, I still stood next to her and showed her that I cared. Not that I think she worried much, but yeah. So yeah, everyone was really depressed and cried, and eventually we all went home. Life went on, but nothing changed really. The only thing that changed was everyone who used to live with us started moving away one by one until it was just the four of us. Myself, Mark, his sister Jackie, and her wife Melanie, and obviously the stupid monkey and the dogs and cats. I will admit that Jackie did calm down after her mother passed away. She was less aggressive, but there were still fights between her and Mark and her and her wife. She became more bossy over me, ordering me around way more, telling me what to do, etc. After some time, they had actually got a second monkey, a girl. I then had double the responsibility, which made me even more depressed. My anxiety was extremely high, and then depression truly came along, and it had started really overpowering me. I can't even remember how much longer we lived in that house before moving yet again. We stayed in the new house with everything being the same, them still mentally abusing me and Mark physically abusing me. Nothing new there. The abuse was a little less, but still there. Depression became stronger because of the abuse, and also them still treating me as a maid and servant. Then right after Christmas, we moved again. This time we stayed in a huge house. Mark also then got a job, and I ended up looking after the monkeys completely all by myself. At this point, I think it was 2021, because when COVID struck, we were still in the third house, the one that I mentioned right before this. Every single day, I just wished that I could just be free. I ended up telling my mom about everything except for Mark abusing me. I only told her afterwards when I left that abusive lifestyle. She couldn't believe it, and she had started feeling sad because of the circumstances I was in, but she still supported me. I remember that I constantly bugged and bothered Mark for us to get our own place, just because we couldn't before because of us having to look after his mother, but that after she passed, nothing held us there anymore, and since then I've been begging him about us getting our own place. But every time he dismissed the thought or told me that we had no money, to which I then told him we can go live with my mom and uncle and work from there. Even my Uncle Jim suggested it, but Mark just wouldn't budge. That's when I knew that he was still clinging way too much onto his sister and it would never happen. That just added on to my depression, and Jackie and Melanie's constant fights were also working on my nerves. One day in the big house we all lived in, the two of them were drunk again, and Mark was at work, and they were arguing over a small sip of beer. Jackie had promised Melanie she'd buy her a whole bottle if she could just have a little sip. Melanie refused, and then both of them grabbed the glass and yanked it back and forth, when suddenly, Melanie yanked the glass out from Jackie's hand and then hit her in the face with it. The glass shattered upon hitting Jackie's face, and it cut her on multiple places. There was beer and a pool of blood everywhere. Only when Melanie saw the amount of damage inflicted on Jackie's face, she had suddenly started to worry. Other days they would attack each other, wrestling on the floor, pulling out each other's hair. It was crazy, and with my intense anxiety, I had to watch it all. And as if things couldn't get worse, in that same big house we lived in, the monkeys started attacking me when I'd go near them. The first time they grabbed me by my ankle as I had walked away and they bit me. The cut was so deep my entire shoe was drenched in blood, and it was extremely hard for me to walk because it was so painful. Then they only attacked me occasionally. But when we moved to our last house after that Christmas, the attacks got worse. The monkeys would cry for water, and whenever I gave it to them, they had scratched my arms up or even bit me if I was close enough. I just had to do damage control on my body, cleaning up the blood and stuff. And usually when they did that, I just leave them without water because of the abuse. They don't drink, they just attack me instead, and it started happening every single day. I just couldn't do anything for them anymore, but I was still instructed to look after them whilst Mark and Jackie were at work, and Melanie was always sleeping her ass away. All of them knew the monkeys attacked me, and all they ever said was, "I'm sorry." And every morning when Jackie and Mark stood up at 6 a.m. to get ready for work, I had to get both of their work clothes for them, and I had to make lunch for the two of them. All whilst Melanie was either asleep or standing around with Jackie smoking a cigarette. She couldn't even get her own wife's clothes. I had to run up and down every single morning for them. After they left, Melanie would go straight to bed and sleep again, and I'd again be stuck alone cleaning, looking after the pest monkeys, doing more washing and more. It was that last year that my depression really took a toll, and I just didn't want to live anymore. I just wanted to die. It was so bad that I actually lost so much weight. I went from a size 32 jeans to a size 28. I don't know if the sizes are the same in the US, but over here a size 28 is super small. Not that I minded the weight loss, because I finally felt beautiful enough to wear my crop tops. I'm not fat, I'm just not really comfortable with my body. I feel fat, but I'm not really. But anyway, yeah, that's how badly I had depression. At the time, I didn't even really love Mark anymore. Not the way I used to, at least. At that point, I just wanted to get rid of the pain, no matter how. Nearing the end of the year, my mom had to go get a cataract removed from her eye, and she needed my help, because she was blind in one eye and the one that needed surgery was the working eye. The reason she needed my help was because she was cleaning my Uncle Jim's house, making dinner, and looking after, wouldn't you know it, her sister whose husband had chased us away in the first place. Both my aunt and her husband live there now as well. And my mom's other sister, who is the manager of the grocery store which I worked at, also moved away to KZN to live with her boyfriend, who is now her husband. And I forgot to mention that my mom's other sister and her husband also lived there when I was there. But when my aunt moved to KZN, my other aunt and her husband moved into the flat that she was staying in at the time. Now, I never liked that aunt's husband because he's a pervert, and he also cornered me and touched me inappropriately one time, but I just never told anyone. So when my aunt and her pervert husband moved into the flat that was now open, there was one more bedroom open in the house. And that's the bedroom that my aunt and her husband who chased us live in now. So my mom and I discussed the me whole helping her out situation until I told her that I didn't want to go back once I'm in Johannesburg again. That's when we planned my escape. If Jackie knew that I wasn't coming back, she wouldn't have let me go. So we told them that I was just going to help her out until her eye's better. When we told Jackie about it, she immediately told me that she knows my mother isn't going to bring me back, and I just lied and said I'll come back. I had to pack some of my things in black garbage bags and then hide them outside in the garden. And then when my mom and Uncle Jim arrived, I snuck out and then we quickly carried the bags to the car. I then snuck back in through the back door and went out the front like normal. My mom and uncle came inside, greeted everyone, and then we carried my remaining 2 or 3 bags out to the car. I then said my goodbyes and we left. It's a 6-hour drive from Johannesburg to KZN, so my uncle didn't really want to waste time, and that's also the reason that I didn't take my Xbox with me. Because both Mark and I had our own consoles, but I never got mine back, and I was utterly stupid for leaving it behind. It actually got stolen by one of Mark's friends, and Mark refused to replace it. I got a new one secondhand, and it worked for quite some time, but then just stopped. It powers on, but it doesn't display any picture on the TV at all. And I'm really depressed about that because I don't have the finances to get myself a new one. The job I'm working doesn't pay that much, and it'll take years to save for a new one. But aside from that, to make a long story short, I moved back to my mom and uncle, and I had to leave more than half of my stuff behind. I lost so much to that family, not only my things, but myself as well. It was in December of 2022 that I had moved back. When we got home, I had waited a few days, then I broke up with Mark. He was still obsessed with me for almost the entire year after that, then left me alone. During that year, I went to visit my best friend who I hadn't seen in 10 years at the time, and whilst there, I'd met a new guy who also lived in the same area as her. We exchanged numbers and started talking. We became really close, and I told him straight up after some time of talking that I liked him and that I wanted to be with him. He felt the same, and in October we had started dating. I told him about my life, and he literally wanted to kill my ex. We visited each other constantly, and my family got to know him and loves him. My life was perfect. Then as recently as last year, in August 2023, my mom passed away. It really devastated me and broke me. I never cried so hard in my life. Even my new boyfriend, who I'll call John, was in disbelief. My uncle then wanted me to take over my mom's duties such as cleaning the house, making dinner, and looking after my disabled aunt and her lazy-ass husband. I told John about it and he said there's no way in hell. He told me to come live with him, and that's exactly what I did. Uncle Jim said it was fine, but I can sense that he's not happy with it. But John doesn't care, because he said that I'll just be wasting my life away instead of being here building a future with him, which is actually true. So I left in September. I also couldn't stand living in the same house that I was so used to having my mom around. I then got a little job at an auction. I only worked 2 days a week. The pay isn't thousands, but it's still enough for me to buy the things I need. Except for my Xbox though, like I said. But I'm telling you, I haven't been this happy in years. John is an amazing man. He's perfect in every way, and he makes me feel like a true princess, and he treats me like one too. He's never treated me badly in any way, and he gave me more in a year than my ex did in 2 months. His family is so amazing and they're so calm, even when they're mad. I guess I can say my mom can rest peacefully knowing that I finally found my Prince Charming and knowing that his family are all angels. We live with his parents still, but he's working to build a future for us, and so am I. We've been together for 1 year and 4 months now, and we're still going strong, and I've never been happier. I'm still so in love with him like I was when we first met. I'm sorry that my story turned out to be so long. I just had so much to share, and there's still so much depression lingering inside me. The tears I shed whilst typing all this is crazy, but I do feel better knowing that my story is out there. I just needed people to know. If you still stuck around to the end, thank you all so much. I promise if I send another story, it won't be this long. And if you're also out there struggling with an abusive boyfriend or girlfriend in their family, please leave the situation. I promise, there really is someone better out there for you. I'm a girl in my late 20s. In 2021, I attended a New Year's party for a new friend I had made. As a result, I had met her friends. I met a guy who we'll call M. We had lots of similar interests and we clicked. We had started dating in early of September 22. Not long after though, red flags started to pop up. He said I love you after just 2 days. I told him I wasn't ready for that yet, that it's too early. He then began showing up at my apartment after work without asking. One time he brought me fast food. I was grateful at first. However, after I finished eating, he'd question why I ate it, saying that it was sugars, fats, and carbs. He then went on a tangent about how I should be intermittent fasting because it's how he cured his gout. He also said if people with cancer did it, they would cure themselves too. I was really angry about this. He knew that my dad had passed away from cancer in 2016 prior to dating. I told him that was not okay. He seemed to admit he was wrong and then apologized. I stupidly gave him another chance. After that situation, things just kept going downhill. He refused to meet my friends and would aggressively introduce me to his. He told me that he'd rather be at the gym than hang out with my friends. His mother refused to meet me because I have tattoos, because people with tattoos steal from her house. So yeah, I wasn't allowed over at his place ever. It was because he lived with her at the time. Ironically, he stole my nicotine pouches from me. He wanted me to quit on his terms, Yet he was smoking and vaping constantly himself. He asked me what I wanted as a gift from a vacation that he went on. I said that I really love postcards, and he said that it was lame. My final straw was when I sat him down and discussed everything with him, how I was uncomfortable with his actions. We didn't yell or argue. It was an adult conversation, or at least on my end it was. Instead of listening to what I had to say, he just said, "Just hit me in the face, it'll make it better." I then broke up with him right then and there. I told him that I just wanted to be friends because we were in a friend group together. The relationship lasted 2 months. That began a vicious cycle of love bombing. He'd bring me gifts of things he liked, not based on my own interests. He started taking my friends individually to dinner and asked about me. Once we caught on to what he was doing, I had enough, and my friends told him not to and to give me some space. I blocked him on all social media, so I thought. In March of 2022, right on my birthday, I realized that I had forgot to block him on Snapchat because I hardly use it. I got a notification that M is typing. I didn't even give him a second to press send. I blocked him right then and there. Things finally went quiet on his end for about a year. I saw him at events and parties hosted by friends in the group. We didn't talk though. I began to move on. I got back on dating apps, dating around casually. Things were good. That is, until June of 2023, a friend of mine passed away suddenly. Because of my grief, I decided to reconnect with others to mend broken friendships. This included M. While drunk at an event, I had started crying about the loss of my friend. M put his arm around me and said that he understood what I was going through. He went to her wake. She did not like him. She was also very popular. I'm also going to mention that M has a huge fear of missing out problem, also called FOMO. This upset me that he went. However, I was way too drunk and sad to argue about it. He was being a really needy friend, constantly asking me about things that I was posting on my social media, getting upset that I didn't give him a personal goodbye after the gathering. I regret my decision to make amends with him rather quickly. He'd act out and then apologize over and over. A few weeks later, Emmett sent me a message saying that he really loves my therapist, and I was just really confused. I never even told him who my therapist was. He said that he saw his business card that I kept on my fridge. This therapist is 5 minutes away from my apartment. Em would have had to drive 45 minutes there and back to see him, instead of going and seeing one closer to him. I told him that made me really uncomfortable and muted his messages. A few days later, my roomie was deleting footage off our security camera's memory card. We have a camera pointing into our apartment parking lot due to catalytic converter thefts. Multiple times between June 2022 and October 2022, Emmett sat in my apartment parking lot. I messaged him with the evidence I had. He came clean that he had been sitting in my parking lot for the memories. He also went to my therapist to feel closer to me, went to my tattoo artist to act buddy-buddy with them, and wanted to see me at my friend's funeral service. He also admitted to joining group chats and Discord channels because I was in them. That he also went to concerts and shows based on my own music tastes because he missed me. Even though he said my music taste was garbage, that he hadn't gotten over me. I told him that we had only dated for 2 months and that this was his final warning. That I would contact the police and get a restraining order. I then blocked him on everything yet again. I began getting to know someone new while this was all going on. He was also in the friend group. We'll call him A. One night when A and I were out together, M decided to drive out to A's place and sit out the place he was living for 2 hours. It was caught on our Ring camera. A told me this was serious, and we all told our friends everything. I was really vague about M up until this point, just saying I needed space and didn't want to be around him. I just still wanted to keep the friend group whole, which was stupid of me. As a result, M was kicked from the friend group chats and was told to stay the fuck away, that he was being a creep. He acted confused and he had questioned why we were canceling him instead of talking things over with him. He told everyone he's a nice guy and nothing he did was malicious, that he's neurodivergent and doesn't know any better. which they all promptly told him that just because it wasn't malicious doesn't mean that it was beyond creepy. Hell, it was putting himself in spaces where I should feel safe that he won't be there. He hasn't tried anything in a few months. I began the process to file a restraining order just in case I needed to. I'm also moving in a few months, and I'm keeping my new address on lockdown. So hopefully I don't see him for the rest of my life. I met my ex in high school. Let's call him Justin. I was a sophomore and he was a junior at the time. We went to school in a small town, so we practically grew up together. I developed a big crush on him when I was in middle school. I came from a toxic family and I was sexually abused at a very young age. I think I chased boys starting in middle school as a way to escape my shitty home life. I was the typical wannabe emo kid who liked the bad boys. I grew up with intense anxiety, so I think masculine guys just made me feel safe. Justin made me feel safe. We were practically opposites. I was meek and shy and fragile, whereas he was social, more popular, and not afraid to take the lead. He always picked on me and it would piss me off, but I liked that he would always notice me when I felt invisible towards everyone else. I developed a huge crush on him until we had started to see each other when we were in high school. I needed a ride home after school, and he said he would take me. After that, we had started spending a lot of time together, and it all went downhill from there. He was not a good boyfriend. At first, he basically never gave me any attention and almost avoided me, which made me want his attention even more. I was so scared to be alone that I just put up with it. After a year, I was about to break up with him, and he confessed that he loved me. That was all it took to reel me back in. He went off to college 6 hours away, and I waited for him. When I graduated high school, I had followed him to the same college. That is when he started to isolate me. From day one of my freshman year of college, he made me sleep with him at his townhouse that his parents paid for off campus. He convinced me to stop talking to friends, my dorm mates, and even my own family. He convinced me that he was the only one I could trust. He convinced me that I was the only one who truly understood him as a person, and he threatened to kill himself anytime we had a fight and I tried to leave him. He took me back with him to a college that is closer to our hometown, and I let him. He continued to isolate me, threatening to kill himself if I left him. Anytime one of my loved ones tried to convince me he was toxic, he would just blame me and turn the argument to make it seem like I was at fault. One time, he actually tied a rope to his neck in an attempt to end his life because he felt like he couldn't live without me, and he convinced me to keep it a secret. I lost so many friends and missed out on my first year of college. I stopped spending time with family because I was convinced he was the only one who understood me. This is where the fucked up stuff happens. 2 years go by, it's 2015, and my house is raided by the cops. Well, my dad gets arrested and he's charged with taking pictures and uploading them to the dark web. My whole town discovers that he's a pedophile and he commits suicide. My family was already toxic, and yet my whole world was turned upside down even more. Out of grief, I practically lived with Justin and his family for a couple of weeks. And then a month after my dad passed, I impulsively decided to get my apartment with Justin. We only had the lease together for 2 weeks. That is all it took for me to hit my breaking point. After my dad committed suicide, I just knew that I couldn't live like this anymore. I decided to break up with Justin, and I told his parents and reached out to his friends through Facebook to tell them. His parents met with us and essentially blamed Justin's suicidal tendencies on our relationship. They decided to not take action. The very night after we got back from dinner with his parents, I told him I was leaving him, and he went insane. He went into the bathroom and started crying and having a conversation with himself. Then he started pacing in the hallway of our apartment, mumbling to himself. It was the first time I've seen him do that. He started pushing me against the wall and took away my phone. When I went to the closet to grab my clothes, he blocked the door and then locked me in the closet. Justin and his family are also very pro-gun, and he had about 4 or 5 firearms in our apartment alone. He grabbed a Glock and continued to block me in the closet, begging me not to leave him. What happened after this is spotty. There's still a lot that I can't remember to this day. But we somehow ended up in the living room, and he's now hovering over me in the corner of the living room. He shows me that the magazine for the gun is fully loaded by taking it out and then putting it back in, and then he went out of his way to show me that the safety was off. He cocked the gun back and then pushed the gun to his head with the finger on the trigger. He was looking into my eyes at that very moment, and I was begging him to let me go, sobbing. He told me if the neighbors heard me cry, he would kill the both of us. I just rocked back and forth with my hands covering my ears, mentally preparing for the sound of the gun and preparing to have parts of his brain or blood on me. I was preparing myself for the possibility that this might be my last moments alive. Then out of desperation, I told him I would stay. Luckily, he believed me. I convinced him that I needed to use the bathroom, and I asked if I could have my phone back. He gave it back, but he stayed outside the bathroom door and then warned me not to contact anyone. I just laughed and said, "No, I'll never do that. I'm yours forever." And when I got in the bathroom, I texted the first person I saw to call the cops. When I got out of the bathroom, I then convinced them that I really needed to go out and get cigarettes. When we stepped outside of our apartment, the cops were surrounding the property. And we were both so calm that they started marching past us until I then started shouting, "It's him! It's him!" pointing at him. They ended up putting him on suicide watch and then committing him to a mental institution for a week. I only met with them once. The caseworker left his file open at one point, and I saw that they had diagnosed him with psychosis. I lied to him again and I told him I would stay, knowing damn well I wouldn't. After all this, Justin's parents and friends actually blamed me for the incident. To this day, I will never understand how I could be the bad guy in this situation. I was only 20 years old and my father just committed suicide. At the time, calling the cops was the right situation once I realized his family and friends weren't going to take action. I was just a kid having to advocate for myself and going through grief. After all of this, he actually convinced his family and friends that I was the abusive one and that I was the manipulative one with anger issues. I moved in with my sister after this. The police confiscated all of Justin's guns and his gun license. They also informed me that he would be kicked out of the military for this. I found out through a friend that Justin's grandfather picked up all of his guns at the police station and then gave them back to him. He would show up to me and my sister's apartment multiple times, sometimes in the middle of the night. One time he showed up looking for a promise ring he gave me, even though he already told me to keep it. He told me that he needed to sell it for drug money because I got him addicted to drugs from the mental facility. He threatened to have me arrested for stealing his property. He would show up to my friends' houses, and one time tried to fight one of my friends and yelled racial slurs at him. I also started receiving death threats from anonymous numbers telling me that I should be dead like my father. I went to the cops and I managed to get him banned from myself and my sister's apartment complex. The cops told me that there wasn't really much else they could do, just to document anything that could be evidence against him. There was a time in my life where I felt very powerless. I had no resources or family. My sister grew to resent me for putting her in danger with my ex. We ended up drifting apart, and I would just continue to hang out with the wrong crowd and had a very bad string of relationships. I somehow actually stayed in college at that time, and I came very close to flunking out. He would drive past my house for years. He would show up to my work at times until I had him banned. I would receive death threats from anonymous numbers, and to this day, I'm not even sure if it was him, but I have my suspicions. I would actively reach out to hotlines for domestic abuse for advice. I moved into my own apartment in a different part of town, and I basically never left my house unless it was for class or for groceries or to go out of town. The pandemic was almost a blessing for me because it meant my safety. After graduating college, I got a job and moved away. I developed intense PTSD after the whole experience. To this day, I still get nightmares where I'm screaming until my roommates have to wake me up. I was diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression. The after effects of all this, plus the trauma from my family, have really been hard. but I'm doing everything I can to being as close to okay as I can be. I cleaned up my shit and I got help. I also let go of a lot of toxic people, and I met a lot of great people who were showering me with love and support. The only thing I would like to thank Justin for is that whole experience forced me to come out of my shell and to advocate for myself. If it wasn't for this experience and all the other experiences in my life, I wouldn't be who I am now. I now have a loving boyfriend. I'm not afraid of being alone, and I'm the bravest that I've ever been in my life. I'm now 26 years old, and I know that this will affect me for the rest of my life. But for anyone out there who's listening who's in a similar situation, it is possible to make it out of this and still live a full, happy life. You are worth it. To Justin, I'm not scared of you anymore. I will never be scared of you again. You could kill me tomorrow and you will still never be able to take away the amazing things that I've done with my life or the love that I've developed for myself. I will never be silent. If you ever try to take me down, I will drag you down with me. Hey everyone, that's about it for today's stories. If you have your own story that you would like to send, you can send it in at southerncannibal.com, or you can email it at southerncannibalstories@gmail.com. I look forward to telling your story. Have a good night or good day, everyone. And remember to always